Hey guys, welcome to Point Seven Out. Wanted to make a quick video covering the new version. Let me start over. A few weeks ago, I decided that it was time for me to dig into the KPI. There's some improvements I've been wanting to make, but some of the things I've been wanting to change are sorry about the filter. I wanted to put a face on here, but at the same time, I don't. Anyways, you know what? Let's just get rid of that distraction. Here we go. So, been a lot of things I've wanted to do with the KPI, and some of them would require some pretty major surgery. And I've just been putting it off and putting it off, and finally I decided I was just bored a couple weeks ago, so I'm like, okay, what is this really going to take to get it done? So I made a copy of the KPI and started tinkering with it, and ended up making some fairly significant changes, mostly under the hood. The way that it functions on the back end, got rid of a lot of the hidden cells that were just giving me a headache. To be, if I'm being honest, they were just headache material. I wanted to get rid of as many of the hidden cells, hidden stuff as possible. Um, so this is the new KPI. The input, all this stuff from, I don't know, from here over was all hidden. I had a bunch of rows up top that were hidden. And anytime I wanted to make a change or fix a bug or do something, I had to unhide them, then remember what was hidden. The reset button didn't really have a home. Now it does. So, at any rate, this is the input screen. I also got rid of, well, we'll get there. So the input screen, and that's the first tab in the KPI now. And of course, you can move these around to wherever you want them to be. Just, click it and drag it and move it around. I wanted to put the input screen first. I don't know why, just that's the way it happened. Setup and reference. I moved some of the stuff into this sheet. Where's it at? So the shooters list is unchanged. You can populate this list with all the shooters you want, all your regular shooters, and then when you're running the LFC or doing whatever you're doing, you can come back here and set your lineup. Um, This column, these two columns, the input and value column, this is used to validate the data over here and provide you a drop-down list. I personally don't use the drop-down list. Some people do, and that's okay. No wrong way to do it. Um, and for that, we actually added a new way of putting in your role entries. I wanted to do this with the last version of the KPI 3.0. Um, but I got some feedback, hey, that's an extra keystroke, really don't want to make it. Well, here we are about 8 months later, and it came back from the same person, George, hi, um, wanted to do the bone tracker style input, where you're putting in the left die and the right die together so that you can track export the data into bone tracker and look at it, analyze it, and see, hey, if I change my dice set, I'll get different results, whatever. Bone Tracker has a lot of those features. I'm not personally into Bone Tracker that much, simply because I don't practice shooting right now. I don't have a proper practice rig. My table I've said a million times, sitting about 9, 10 inches too high. No, 7 or 8 inches too high. Anyways, it's too high. So if I were to practice tossing on my current setup, I would develop bad muscle memory. And that is one thing to stay away from. You want to be at the proper height, around 28 inches. You want to be at the proper distance, about 8 feet, 9 feet, whatever it is you're shooting for, so that you can practice and get the proper muscle memory on your toss. Anyways, that's all besides the point. The other thing we did, Henry over at Silent Shooter um, has requested the crapless mode. And he did that very early on. He's like, hey, can you do, what about crapless? And I'm like, that's going to be really hard. I don't know even where to begin to do that. Well, you know what? I threw this checkbox in here and started tinkering, and it only took about 5 changes to make the crapless work. And pretty cool stuff. So you can see with the crapless, well, don't have any rolls on here right now for that, but crapless mode does work, which is pretty cool. and bone tracker mode. If we turn bone tracker mode off, you do the roll entry the same way you've always done it. You can't do it in the middle of a session. It will break your input. Um, Probably write a script to fix that, but eh, it would probably be really, really messy and really confusing. So anyways, the setup and reference page, um, these two columns, D and E, are what's used for the data validation and the drop-down list. Over here, the messages that will show up in the display, you've all seen them, Craps Nation, George puts the Skype link in there. Arnell puts some, stuff like, oh my God, nice hit, way to go, let's go, etc. Uh, I just put in here, Craps Nation, the date and time, and the KPI version. You can change this to your taste, do whatever you want to do. Same thing with the title, it shows up at the top of there. I change that to, LFC, Wednesday LFC, Sunday LFC, Craps Nation, practice shooting, whatever it is you want the title to be. And over here, column K, you'll see I got a big note up here for best performance, delete column K. And that's because this column is generating a little over 100 random rolls that I use. I use that data to test the KPI. And that's that's the data that's in there now in the input. Check the box and it'll change it to traditional or bone tracker. I probably should have just used the bone tracker checkbox. That's okay. And these two columns, the L and the M, that's just the seed data for the random numbers. This has got this, what we've been doing all this time with the KPI. This has got the bone tracker, all the possible dice combinations. So it all works. The data tab contains information that used to be hidden on the input tab. And by separating it, allows me to quickly see what's going on behind the scenes. And this is data that's used to generate the displays. All right, you don't want to change anything in here. Typically, if you do, for a bug fix or a minor tweak or something, let me know what you're doing and why. Possibly, if it makes sense, if it's if it's fixing a bug or something, we'll put it in the next version of the KPI. But I set this thing to protected, so if you try to change something, we'll just change that. It's going to give you a heads up, and you can hit OK to make that change. But that, fair warning, if you make a change here, you can mess up the way the roll tracker works. All right, used to have three different displays. I call it a George style or original style. I had my own way that I wanted to set it up, and then I created a third display specifically for Silent Shooter because of the way he was doing things. And I decided, you know what, having three different display tabs is kind of ridiculous, and it was also kind of a pain having horizontal and vertical stuff in the same space. So I split it up and simplified it. So we got the main board here in these columns, and vertical roll tracker, excuse me, horizontal roll tracker designed for the bottom of the screen with your roll count there, duplicated here, roll count down here. And new with the bone tracker mode, it will display your dice roll, left and right die. How about that? And down here, got the plane. Um, if you're doing an overhead camera like I am, and you don't want to mess with the puck yourself, you can let the KPI do that for you. Just, resize these things to suit your preferences. So you resize the row. Don't resize the column. If you resize up here, it affects everything, including the trackers. Um, but you can set this to be left, right, center justification. You can adjust the column height or the row height to change the button size. So whatever it is that works for you. And when you're doing your layout in OBS, just hit that test button. It'll show you all the buttons. Oh, I forgot to copy that over there. So there's that. There's that. Boom. Beautiful. And let's make that match the rest for center justification. Hey, look at that. Doing a video and I fix a minor bug all at the same time. All right, so the dice only work in the bone tracker mode, and that's because on the other mode, the traditional mode, we don't track the dice roll. We track the result. Was it a 7? Was it a 6? Was it a 4? But we don't know if it was a hard, well, we do track the hard ways, but like in terms of a 7, we don't know if it was a 6-1 or a 1-6 or a whatever that combination is. There's 6 of them. I'm not going to go through them all. All right, second display has the vertical roll tracker, roll history, I should say. So that's there. The shooter histories, which are there. And of course, those of you that are using this, you can crop this down to whatever it is you want. The last 2, 3, 4, 5 shooters. I just threw a bunch in here so that you have options. All right, important note here. So I didn't want to make this confusing, but at the same time, I wanted to provide as many options as possible. So towards that end, I've created 2 graphs here. And the difference between these 2 graphs, this one here is actually tracking the number of rolls. So you can see, in the random data, um, we're expecting, say, 27s, and we rolled, or excuse me, we're expecting 18 sevens, but we rolled 20. Knocked it out of the park with the sixes and all that. This graph back here is the one I personally prefer, which is going by percentages. And there you can see that, um, you know, the stair steps stay the same, the percentages are there. You can still see visually that, hey, we knocked the sixes out of the park. What was the actual percentage? It was 22%, whereas we're expecting whatever the expectation was. That's not going to give me a thing on the tooltip, 13.89%. So pick the graph that you want, customize it to your taste. You can delete the other graphs. No harm, no foul. In fact, you're better off if you delete the graph. If you're not going to use a graph, just delete it. That way, Google Sheets does not have to process that data any more than necessary. All right, same thing up here, all your gauges. Um, box numbers inside 4s and 10s, come out 7, all that's the same. I have a gauge here. This is going to track um, pass line versus don't pass. That's all that's going to track. And it'll be a negative number, -4 for don't pass. So this is telling me in that shooter sample, we should be playing the don't pass. Of course, you never know that until it's all over with. Um, let's see. So if you're going to use the gauges, great. If not, delete them. And as always, you can customize those to your content. So we just right click up here in the corner. There's the 3 dots. You can't see when it's in a black background, but it's there. And we just edit chart. That brings it up. Click customize chart style. And if we want to put a transparent background on there, we'll just change that background color to the magenta to match the rest. And there you go. Now it's magenta and will be 100% transparent for you. Let's undo that. All right. Oh, should have mentioned this at the front when I talked about the bone tracker feature. Your roll entries will come in here, and you can just highlight and copy those over, paste them into Bone Tracker, and you've got your analysis. And that's the quick and dirty run through of the crapless KPI 3.1. Um, if you find any bugs or if you have any feature requests or enhancements that you would like to see, put some comments in the video below or find me on Skype. And if they make sense and I can, have the time to do them and they don't impact performance too bad, then I will be more than happy to look at it and see what I can do. May not be tomorrow, may not be next week, it might not be till next year. I mean, shoot, crapless for Henry, that's taken me 8 months to figure out, which is kind of silly because it was turned out to be a very easy modification. Um, I just didn't want to take the time to dig into it. Anyways, I'm going to set this OBS up, or excuse me, set the KPI up for OBS. So if you don't care about that, you can tune out now. Um, but if you want to learn how to do that, I've got another tutorial, the original tutorial on how to do that. I'm just going to run through it again and see what we can figure out. So the first thing you want to do is create your own copy of the KPI. So we'll just go up to the file menu, create a copy, and recommend you keep the version number in there because when first one you'll see will probably be 311. When bug fixes happen, it'll be 312, 313, etc. That way you can go into Google Drive and delete the old ones if you're so inclined to clean up and keep the current one. So there we go. So we'll go ahead and some of these options you won't see, but let's create that My KPI 3.1.0. We'll hit OK. Google Sheets will open that up in a new tab. And that will come complete with all your sample data, etc. Go ahead and close that first tab so I don't get confused and make mistakes and screw up the original. All right, first thing you want to do is get your reset button working. So we'll click it. We're going to wait a few seconds and it's going to come up with a message to allow access. So we'll wait for that to happen. I don't know, I really don't understand why it takes so long, but it does. So we will continue. We'll choose an account. And if this is your first time doing this through OBS, it will ask you for login information to your Google account, and that's good. We're going to go to the untitled project, unsafe. And Google is just throwing up all the security warnings because the scripting, if you allow random scripts to run on your Google account, it has access, I think, to everything in your Google account. So all of your documents in your drive, your G drive, or I forget what they used to call it, but or G Stream now. I think it has access to your Gmail, and that could be kind of dangerous. So, and I'm going to show you actually, I'm going to go ahead and allow this, and I'm going to show you how to check that out. So that script right there, if you come up with something and it's wanting access, you can come up here in Google Sheets to the extensions menu, app script. And this will show you all the scripts that are attached to this document. And in this case, code.gs is the only script in here. And you can see, it's calling a function reset inputs. That's the name of the function used in the sheet. It gets the name or it gets the sheet app. It gets an ID for the active sheet, Google Sheet that you're using. Then it looks on that sheet for a range of data called input.input, and then it will clear the content. That's all the script does. This script is safe. Um, Even coming from me, you might want to check that out if you're worried about your Google account. Um, but just that's how you can check a script to make sure you're safe and secure when bringing in foreign documents from other people that you don't know, don't trust. All right. And sometimes even people you do trust. So we've got the script running. We can now hit the reset button and it will actually reset our input fields. There we go. We got a blank slate to work with. Okay. Bringing up OBS, got a blank slate, and I want to bring in that browser. So the first thing we need to do is close this. That was from a trial run. So come back here to the sheets, go to the input tab. I'm going to copy this URL. So we'll copy that and hide those menus. And this is really annoying to me. You can hide these menus and unhide them, and they show up that way in whatever browser you're looking at. So right now we're in Chrome. When we load this in OBS, the view will be the same, and go from there. So, all right, go to View, Docs, Custom Browser Docs. I've already got mine for the KPI input. We'll just copy in the new URL, apply that, and close. Then we can go to View, Docs, KPI input, and there it is. We'll dismiss that warning, and this should show everything. It'll take a few seconds to load, and we've already given access to the reset button, etc. So we're good. And that's really all we need on this browser doc. Now, come back to there. We want to bring in our first display page. And so there's that. And some of this stuff is going to, the dice stuff, I can probably clean that up so they don't look so nasty when there's no data in there. But don't worry about that. We'll fix that here in just a few minutes. All right, copy that, copy the URL back to OBS, and we are going to add a new source. So right click, add browser, and we're going to do the KPI display. 1. So we've got two KPI tabs, and we're going to bring them both in. So there's KPI display 1. Select all that, Control V to paste. Set your width to 1920 by 1080. And we want to refresh the browser anytime the scene. Now let's not do that. Sometimes you might have to tweak some of these other settings, but for now, just the URL, the width, and the height. Go ahead and hit OK, and it'll take a couple seconds. Boom, there's our sheet. We're ready to bring that in. Now, all I'm interested in bringing in is the tracker board. Oh, so I'm going to hold down the Alt key. I'm going to drag that bottom handle up to crop everything out, or at least get me close to getting everything cropped out. There's that. And we'll bring that down there. I'll put that up there in the corner. And we'll just make that whatever height it wants to be. I'm going to go and resize my table to match up with it. It looks like we still got some black in there. We'll just get down to nothing but magenta. And then we can right click on that, go to filters, and we're going to add chroma key. And what the chroma key does is going to hide all that magenta. So boom, there's magenta. And the magenta is really close to red. So we want to turn the similarity down just a little bit. Maybe about 200 to 225 seems to work for me. Play with it and see what works for you. Um, back to the default, you can see, oh, click defaults. Well, the default was way up there. You can see this red 0 up here really fades out. So we'll, again, crank that down to around 220 or so. Close that, and there's our roll tracker. And we got a little bit of noise down here. Don't worry about that. I'll clean that up. You can clean that up. Actually, that's bugging me. So we'll right click on it, go to transform, edit transform, and we can increase those crops a little bit on the left, on the top, on the bottom, bring that in on the right. Close, and that looks way better. All right. Now let's bring in the other display. And so we'll go to display 2. And all the graphs show no data, and that's fine. We're just going to copy that, copy that, copy the URL, go back to OBS, and we'll add another source. So right click, add browser, API display 2. And again, we're just going to paste in that URL, set the width and the height, make it 1920 by 1080 or something suitably large. So we can always shrink it down and it looks okay. If we try to zoom things in, sometimes they don't always look good. All right. So what we're interested in this time is the the vertical roll history. Come on, be good to me. There we go. So we're just going to crop that fairly close. We're going to move it into position. And you play with the sizes. So here, if we come back here to Google Sheet, we can make that column a little narrower, just like that. And back to OBS, you see that narrowed it down quite a bit. And you can also resize it in OBS itself. So more than one way to skin that cat. Let's put an entry in here just so we can see what it's going to look like. So 134. Take just a moment, but there it is. And that showed up as a hard way for some reason. Why did it show up as a hard 4? I've got a bug to work out. Okay, I'm not going to do that right now. We see that the display is about where we want it. And at this point, it's just a matter of, finagling everything to do what you want. Um, Off that same display, display two, let's say we want to pull in a gauge or one of the graphs. So we'll just copy it and paste a reference. And let's go and grab one of these gauges. Let's grab the field gauge. So crop that down, and maybe we just want to stick that right there so we can track our field hits. Um, you can add as many of these as you want. And again, keep what you're using, delete the things you're not using. Most of the graphs, most of the stuff on the display page, let's go back to the browser. All these graphs and gauges you can delete. It's not going to hurt anything. On the display, if you're not using, down here I've got virtual on-off pucks that you can use. Might go ahead and grab one of those and show you how that works. If you're not using these horizontal roll trackers, you can delete those. Just, right there, right click and delete the row. No harm, no foul. If you decide you want to go back and start over, you can still do that. So we'll delete those rows because I'm not going to use those. So delete rows 4 and 5. I'm not going to use this particular dice display, so we'll just delete those so they don't have to process. Um, I don't go crapless, so let's just delete those 2 rows. Don't need them, don't want them. And let's go back to OBS and show you how those virtual on-off buttons. Oh, bone tracker export page. Uh, this does do quite a bit of calculation on 500, actually 1,000 different calculations. Every time you put a roll entry in, this page does 1,000 different calculations. It only takes a second, a fraction of a second, but every little bit helps. So if you're not going to use the bone tracker stuff, delete the page. And I'm not going to use it myself for what, actually, I might use it. I'm going to leave that there. I can always add it back. It doesn't matter. Um, so yeah, so we can delete the unused items here. On the setup and reference, this column K that generates a little over 100 random rolls, you can delete that column. Will help by a fraction of a second, but again, every little bit helps. All right, let's go back to OBS. I'm going to make a copy of. Oh, I deleted some stuff, so I got to redo this one. There we go. We're back in business. All right. So let's copy display one. So right click, copy, right click, paste a reference. And the new display one, it puts it right where it came from. So just we'll just pick one here, bring that down. There's our virtual on off buttons. And we'll crop this down to that. And I don't know if I'm going to use these or not. Somebody might want them if they have an overhead display similar to mine. Um, do that, and then we can resize this whole mess so that the buttons are approximately where they need to be. And I don't know that it's ever going to get absolutely perfect for you guys. And that's really not, something for you to decide. Crop this in a little bit closer. And, it's got the transparency, so not a big deal there. And place those buttons wherever the heck you want them. Now, those buttons are kind of big. Let's say we want them to be smaller. So let's come back to the browser real quick. Display one. So those are the size they are. We got them in the approximately the correct position. So let's resize that row to make them smaller. And I'm also going to come in here and I'm going to remove the grid lines. That way we don't see those. And I don't need these numbers, so I'm just going to delete those. Those are there just for layout purposes. Once you're got your layout, just delete them. All right, back to OBS, and that looks a whole lot better. All right, so we can turn back to the browser. We'll turn the test mode off, back to OBS, and now we only see that we are on a 0.04. So instead of using my real puck over here, we can just use the let KPI do virtual puck for us. And that's just one less thing I got to mess with. The other item that we added in there are the dice roll, left and right die rolls. So let's make another copy of this. KPI display one, copy, right click, paste reference. And once again, we'll use our Alt key to expand this out. I don't know where those are going to be. Hey, there's the dice. All right. So there's our, whoa, undo that. So there's some dice. We can put them anywhere on the screen you want. I can put them up here in the corner where I usually have my dice cam. And now when I roll the dice, as soon as I put that entry in, the dice will show up on the screen along with the virtual on-off puck, and everything is beautiful. And that takes care of, manually doing it. Like I said, I'm not sure if I'm going to use it. I'll probably play with it today in a couple of recordings just to see how it goes. Um, and then decide from there if I want to use the overlays or not. Anyways, that's the basics of getting the KPI into OBS. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, maybe you know an easier way to do it all. Oh, we didn't do a transparency over here. So select the vertical roll history, go to filters, and add the chroma key, change it to magenta, and drag that down to somewhere around 200 to 220. Close, and there we go. Back on the charts, if you want to make that transparent, you can do that. Come back here on the display two, we're grabbing the field chart. Up here's the three dots. You can't see it in a black background, but that's okay. We'll just edit the chart, customize, chart style, select your background to be the magenta. And chart border color, also magenta. There we go. Close that, back to OBS. And you can see that the chroma key is already applied. So now our field chart, our field gauge is transparent background. So it just kind of blends in and does its thing. All right, guys, thanks for checking this out. Feel free to use the tracker. I'm going to put a link in the description below. That link will be good for the 3.1 series. If you want the older one at 3.0.12, check out the, I think it's video 2 in the OBS KPI tutorial playlist. There's a link there for the older version of the KPI. Not a lot of functional change. Well, there is a lot of functional change. We added a lot, but the basics of how that old version of KPI, that stuff is unchanged. We've just added some new stuff to it. So with that, take care. That's all I've got for now. Thank you.